The New Deal had codified the idea that presidents could control the economy. Truman didn't seem up to the challenge. In the early days of the Truman administration, columnists asked, what would Roosevelt do if he were alive? Now Republicans joked, what would Truman do if he were alive? When he did act, the president was seen to have botched it. Labor strikes during his term had paralyzed the oil, lumber, textile, and electrical industries. Newspapers began talking about worker revolts. Truman had seized the railroads and then delivered a national address that depicted labor leaders as traitors. The entire action was panned. To err, they said, is Truman. Leading up to the 1948 campaign, a number of Democrats wanted Truman to step down to improve the party's chances. The Democratic National Committeemen from New Jersey and Illinois and FDR's sons, Jimmy and Franklin Jr., all opposed his nomination. At the very center of the Truman administration, wrote Walter Lippmann, there is a vacuum of responsibility and authority. Truman's top counselor, Clark Clifford, had been reading and rereading a 31-page memo from a Washington lawyer, James Rowe, which outlined an emergency set of steps required to save the incumbent. I do not know whether Mr. Truman would be elected if everything done in this memo were done to perfection, wrote Rowe, but I do know that if no attempt is made to do the major suggestions, us Democrats ain't got a chance in hell. The first suggestion was to send Truman west, where Republicans were making inroads, but how to do it? The Monday Night Group, as the assemblage was called, needed a creative solution. Creativity being in short supply as demonstrated by the bland name they'd given themselves. They didn't have the money to fund a political trip, so they had to make any trip look official in order to spend all that taxpayer money. Undersecretary of the Interior Oscar Chapman said Robert Gordon Sproul, the president of the University of California, Berkeley, had invited the president to speak at the school. That, plus a celebration to christen a new turbine on the Grand Coulee Dam, gave Truman's advisers the pretext to launch the president westward. To get to California, Truman took a 17-car train, a long and winding way to touch millions of voters and lay the groundwork for his presidential campaign. It would be the first of 3 such train trips he would take, traveling 31,000 miles in all. It became the iconic modern example of the American campaign, a candidate moving from town to town, winning over people through determination and contact. Today, that kind of mass conversion of voters would be impossible. General election campaigns are largely decided by party affiliation. With a shrinking number of independent and persuadable voters, candidates stump in order to fire up their coalition. Truman succeeded in 1948 by accumulating votes person by person. It was a cinematic victory of the underdog who persevered through grit. It also exemplifies a familiar modern tale in which pundits completely misread the electorate. Truman is a gone goose. Truman is a gone goose, conservative former Congresswoman Claire Booth Luce told the Republican convention. His time is short and his situation is hopeless. In March 1948, the president's approval rating had dropped to 36%. The accidental president, selected in a hurry in 1944 and then thrust into the job when FDR died, was never served by the comparison to his predecessor. In death, FDR seemed twice the size of ordinary mortals. Truman seemed thoroughly average height, average weight, and average intellect. When Franklin Roosevelt died in 1945 and Harry Truman took his place, wrote Robert Allen and William Shannon in the Truman Merry-Go-Round, it was as if the star of the show had left and his role had been taken by a spear carrier from the mob scene. It looked as if Truman was headed back to Missouri after the election. If Truman is nominated, columnist Joseph and Stuart Alsop wrote, he will be forced to wage the loneliest campaign in recent history. A campaign billboard in Tulsa, Oklahoma, summed up the view. Truman said he wasn't big enough to be president, and he ain't. Vote Republican in 48.